calculates and justifies the resentment dammed up in the souls of the frustrated. He kindles the vision of a breathtaking future so as to justify the sacrifice of the transitory present. He stages the world of make-believe, so indispensable for the realization of self-sacrifice and united action. He evokes the enthusiasm of communion, the sense of liberation from a petty and meaningless individual existence. What are the talents requisite for such a performance? Exceptional intelligence, noble character, and originality seem neither indispensable nor perhaps desirable. The main requirements seem to be audacity and a joy in defiance, an iron will, a fanatical conviction that he is in possession of one and only truth, faith in his destiny and luck, a capacity for passionate hatred, contempt for the present, a cunning estimate of human nature, a delight in symbols, spectacles, and ceremonials, unbounded brazenness which finds expression in a disregard for consistency and fairness, a recognition that the innermost cravings of a following is for communion, and that there can never be too much of it, capacity for winning and holding the utmost loyalty of a group of able lieutenants. This last faculty is one of the most essential and elusive. The uncanny powers of a leader manifest themselves not so much in the hold he has on the masses as in the ability to dominate and almost bewitch a small group of able men. These men must be fearless, proud, intelligent, and capable of organizing and running large-scale undertakings, and yet they must submit wholly to the will of the leader, draw their inspiration and driving force from him, and glory in his submission. And glory in this submission. Not all the qualities enumerated above are equally essential. The most decisive for the effectiveness of a mass movement leader seems to be audacity, fanatical faith in a holy cause, and awareness of the importance of a close-knit collectivity, and above all, the ability to evoke fervent devotion in a group of able lieutenants. Trotsky's failure as a leader came from his neglect, or more probably his inability, to create a machine of able and loyal lieutenants. He did not attract personal sympathies, or if he did, he could not keep them. An additional shortcoming was his irrecticable respect for the individual, particularly the creative individual. He was not convinced of the sinfulness and ineffectuality of an autonomous individual existence, and did not grasp the overwhelming importance of communion to a mass movement. Sun Yat-sen attracted to himself an extraordinary number of able and devoted followers, firing their imaginations with his visions of a new China and compelling loyalty and self-sacrifice. Unlike him, Chiang Kai-shek seems to lack every essential quality of mass movement leader. On the other hand, de Gaulle is certainly a man to watch. The leaders of the communist parties outside Russia, by their subservience to Stalin and the Politburo, cannot attain the status of genuine leaders. They remain able lieutenants. For communism to become a present and effective mass movement in any Western country, one of two opposites has to happen. Either the personality of Stalin is made so tangible and immediate that it can act as a catalyst, or the local Communist Party has to cut loose from Russia and, after the manner of Tito, flaunt its defiance against both capitalism and Stalinism. Had Lenin been the emissary of a leader and a Politburo sitting in some distant foreign land, it is doubtful whether he could have ever exercised his fateful influence on the course of events in Russia. 91. The crude ideas advanced by many of the successful mass movement leaders of our time incline one to assume that a certain coarseness and immaturity of mind is an asset to leadership. However, it was not intellectual crudity of Enemy McPherson or a Hitler which won and held their following, but the boldness and self-confidence which promoted these leaders to give full rein to their preposterous ideas. A genuinely wise leader who dared to follow out the course of his wisdom would have an equal chance of success. The quality of ideas seems to play a minor role in mass movement leadership. What counts is the arrogant gesture, the complete disregard of the opinion of others, the single-handed defiance of the world. Charlatanism, of some degree, is indispensable to effective leadership. There can be no mass movement without some deliberate misrepresentation of facts. No solid, tangible advantage can hold a following and make it zealous and loyal unto death. The leader has to be practical and a realist, yet must talk the language of the visionary and the idealist. Originally is not prerequisite of great mass movement leadership. One of the most striking traits of the successful mass movement leader is his readiness to imitate both friend and foe, both past and contemporary models. The daring which is essential to this type of leadership consists as much in the daring to imitate as in the daring to defy the world. Perhaps the clue to any heroic career is an unbounded capacity for imitation, a single-minded fashioning after a model. This excessive capacity for imitation indicates that the hero is without fully developed and realized self. There is much in him that is rudimentary and suppressed. His strength lies in his blind spots and in plunging all outlets but one. 92. The total surrender of a distinct self is a prerequisite for the attainment of both unity and self-sacrifice. And there is probably no more direct way of realizing this surrender than by inoculating and exalting the habit of blind obedience. When Stalin forces scientists, writers, and artists to crawl on their bellies and deny their individual intelligence, sense of duty, and moral sense, he's not indulging a sadistic impulse, but is solemnizing in a most impressive way the supreme virtue of blind obedience. All mass movements rank obedience with the highest virtues and put it on a level with faith. Union of minds requires not only a perfect accord in the one faith, but completely submission and obedience of will to the Church and the Roman Pontiff as to God himself. Obedience is not only the first law of God, but also the first tenet of a revolutionary party of a fervent nationalism. Not to reason why, is considered by all mass movements the mark of a strong and generous spirit. The disorder, bloodshed, and destruction which mark the trail of a rising mass movement lead us to think of the followers of the movement as being by nature rowdy and lawless. Actually, mass ferocity is not always the sum of individual lawlessness. Personal truculence militates against united action. It moves the individual to strike out for himself. It produces the pioneer, adventurer, and bandit. The true believer, no matter how rowdy and violent his acts, is basically an obedient and submissive person. The Christian converts who staged razzes against the University of Alexandria and lynched professors suspected of unorthodoxy were submissive members of a compact church. The communist rioter and a servile member of a party. Both the Japanese and Nazi rowdies were the most disciplined people the world has been, or has seen. In this country, the American employer often finds in the racial fanatic of our South, so given to mass violence, a respectful and docile factory hand. The Army, too, finds him particularly amicable to discipline. 93. People whose lives are barren and insecure seem to show a greater willingness to obey than people who are self-sufficient and self-confident. To the frustrated, freedom from responsibility is more attractive than freedom from restraint. They are eager to barter their independence for relief from the burdens of deciding and being responsible for inevitable failure. They willingly abdicate the directing of their lives to those who want to plan, command, and shoulder all responsibility. Moreover, submission by all to a supreme leader is an approach to their ideal of equality. In time of crisis, during floods, earthquakes, epidemics, depressions, and wars, separate individual efforts is of no avail, and people of every condition are ready to obey and follow a leader. To obey is then the only firm point in a chaotic day-by-day existence. 94. The frustrated are also likely to be the most steadfast followers. It is remarkable that in a co-cooperative effort, the least self-reliant are the least likely to be discouraged by defeat, for they join others in common undertakings, not so much to ensure the success of a cherished project as to avoid an individual shouldering of blame in case of failure. When the common undertakings fail, they are still spared the one thing they fear most, namely, the showing up of their individual shortcomings. Their faith remains unimpaired, and they are eager to follow in a new attempt. The frustrated follow a leader less because of their faith that he is leading them to the promised land than because of their immediate feeling that he is leading them away from their unwanted selves. Surrender to a leader is not a means to an end, but a fulfillment. Whether they are led is of secondary importance. 95. There's probably a crucial difference between a mass movement leader and a leader in a free society. In a more or less free society, the leader can retain his hold on the people only when he has blind faith in their wisdom and goodness. A second-rate leader possessed of this faith will outlast a first-rate leader who is without it. This means that in a free society, the leader follows the people even as he leads them. He must, as someone said, find out where the people are going so that he may lead them. When the leader in a free society becomes contemptuous of the people, he sooner or later proceeds on the false and fatal theory that all men are fools and eventually blunders into defeat. Things are different when the leader can employ ruthless coercion. Whereas in an active mass movement, the leader can exact blind obedience, he can operate on the second theory that all men are cowards, treat them accordingly, and get results. One of the reasons that communist leaders are losing out in our unions is that by following the line and adopting the tactics of the party, they are assuming the attitude and using the tactics of a mass movement leader in an organization made up of free men. Action. 96. Action is a unifier. There is less individual distinctiveness in the genuine man of action, the builder, soldier, sportsman, and even the scientist. that in the thinker, or in one whose creativeness flows from communion with the self. The go-getter and the hustler have much in them that is abortive and undifferentiated. One is never really stripped for action unless one is striped for a distinct and differentiated self. An active people thus tends towards uniformity. It is doubtful whether without the vast action involved in the conquest of a continent, our nation of immigrants could have attained its amazing homogeny in so short a time. Those who come to this country to act, to make money, were more quickly and thoroughly Americanized than those who came to realize some lofty ideal. The former felt an immediate kinship with the millions absorbed in the same pursuit. It was as if they were joining the brotherhood. They recognized early that in order to succeed, they had to blend with their fellow men, to do as others do, learn the lingo and play the game. Moreover, the mad rush in which they joined prevented the unfolding of their being, so that without a distinct individuality, they could not, even if they had been so inclined, put up an effective resistance against the influence of their new environment. On the other hand, those who came to this country to realize an ideal of freedom, justice, or equality measured the realities of the new land against their ideal and found them wanting. They felt superior and inevitably insulated themselves against the new environment. 97. Men of thought seldom work well together, whereas between men of action there is usually an easy camaraderie. Teamwork is rare in intellectual or artistic undertakings, but common and almost indispensable among men of action. The cry, "Go to! Let us build us a city and a tower!" is always a call for unified action. A communist commissar of industry has probably more in common with the capitalist industrialist than with a communist theoretician. The real international is that of men of action. 98. All mass movements avail themselves of action as a means of unification. The conflicts of a mass movement seeks and incites serves only to down its enemies, but also to strip its followers of their distinct individuality and render them more supple to the collective medium. Clearing of land, building of cities, exploration of large-scale industrial undertakings serve a similar purpose. Even mere marching can serve as a unifier. The Nazis made vast use of this preposterous variant of action. Hermann Rothschild, who at first thought this eternal marching a senseless waste of time and energy, recognized later in its subtle effect. Quote, "Marching diverts men's thoughts. Marching kills thought. Marching makes an end of individuality." End quote. A mass movement's call for action evokes an eager response in the frustrated. For the frustrated see in action a cure for all that ails them. It brings self-forgetting, and it gives them a sense of purpose and worth. Indeed, it seems that frustration stems chiefly from the inability to act, and that the most poignantly frustrated are those whose talents and temperament equip them ideally for a life of action, but are condemned by circumstances to rust away in idleness. How else explain the surprising fact that the Lenins, Trotskys, Mussolinis, and Hitlers who spent the best part of their lives talking their heads off in cafes and meetings reveal themselves suddenly as the most able and tireless men of action of their time? 99. Faith organizes and equips man's soul for action. To be in possession of the one and only truth to never doubt one's righteousness, to feel that one is backed by a mysterious power, whether it be God, destiny, or the law of history. To be convinced that one's opponents are incarnation of evil and must be crushed. To exult in self-denial and devotion to duty. These are admirable qualifications for resolute and ruthless action in any field. Psalm-singing soldiers, pioneers, businessmen, and even sportsmen have proved themselves formidable. Revolutionary and nationalist enthusiasms have a similar effect. They too can turn spiritless and inert people into fighters and builders. Here then is another reason for the apparent indispensability of a mass movement in the modernization of a backward and stagnant countries. However, the exceptional fitness of the true believer for a life of action can be as much a danger as an aid to the prospects of a mass movement. By opening vast fields of feverish action, a mass movement may hasten its end. Successful action tends to become an end in itself. It drains all energies and fervors into its own channels. Faith and holy cause, instead of being the supreme purpose, become more lubricants to the machine of action. The true believer, who succeeds in all he does, gains self-confidence and becomes reconciled with his self and the present. He no longer sees his only salvation in losing himself in the oneness of a corporate body and in becoming an anonymous particle with no will, judgment, and responsibility of his own. He seeks and finds his salvation in action, improving his worth and in asserting his individual superiority. Action cannot lead him to self-realization, but he readily finds in it self-justification. If he still hangs on to his faith, it is but to bolster his confidence and legitimize his success. Thus the taste of continuous successful action is fatal to the spirit of collectivity. A people steeped in action is likely to be the least religious, the least revolutionary, and the least chauvinist. The social stability and the political and religious tolerance of the Anglo-Saxon peoples is due in part to the relative abundance among them of the will, skill, and opportunities for action. Action served them as a substitute for a mass movement.